Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Apex Online Racing IMSA Lights Endurance Series, where today we have coverage of round 6 from season 1 at the Daytona International Road Course, as you can see there with the stream thumbnail, the picture that you can see currently up on the video feed. This is unfortunately a rerun. Unfortunately, we tried to attempt this round last weekend, or sorry, not last weekend, but last week. However, Steam was having some serious issues and was dropping in and out in various different regions, and proved to be quite difficult and didn't really facilitate us to actually go racing. So we are rerunning the race here today, but because we did manage to complete qualifying last week, we shall be going with the qualifying results with 2 formation laps prior to the start of this 90-minute race that we have here for you today, and that will give the guys the opportunity to form up in their correct grid positions that they qualified in last week, ready for that green flag. So just quickly before we get on to where the drivers will actually be starting today, here is the season calendar that we have run for the opening season of the IMSA Lights Endurance Championship. Obviously you can see there the first round was at Circuit of the Americas. Watkins Glen was round 2, followed by Laguna Seca. Then we had a week's break before returning to Long Beach, and then the previous round in round 5 was at Road America, and we've been alternating between 60-minute and 90-minute length races, and our final round of round 6 here today is obviously not the 7th of March, it's now the 14th of March, but it's at the Daytona International Road Circuit, and it's going to be a 90-minute race. Looking at the results from round 5, you can see the LMP3 results there up on the screen. So AD Ace came away with the race win, with Bo not too far there in second place behind him, with Smolder taking third, Dow King taking up 4th position, before Brzanczyk came across the line in 5th, ahead of Intergalactic Gentleman in 6th position, with Flaming Parrot in 7th. Aaron came home in 8th position, with J Peaches in 9th, Scott Burnett in 10th, Minisco 11th, and Ruddy Bird 12th. But from Aaron in 8th place all the way down to Ruddy Bird in 12th position, none of those drivers finished the race. However, Aaron did manage to complete more than 90% of the race. In fact, he actually ran out of fuel on the last lap and didn't quite make it to the line. So he gets and retains his 1 championship point that he earned last time round in round 5. So that is how it's affected the championship standings that you can see up on the screen there. AD Ace is untouchable for this race. He has been crowned our LMP3 class champion. However, there is a championship fight for second place between Smolder and Bo, and you can see that there is a single point separating the 2 drivers there. So Bo will obviously need to outscore Smolder by 2 points in order to retain or take that second position. However, I was reading that correctly. I was just having a look at the previous round results as well that I have on screen as a little bit of extra information for myself. And because Bo does have 1 other previous race win, whereas Smolder doesn't, Bo will automatically take second place if Bo and Smolder were to finish on equal points. You can see Brzanczyk is there in 4th place, about 13 points behind him, with Ruddy Bird, Pirate, Marco the Pirate, sorry, Jeremy, Flaming Parrot, and Intergalactic Gentleman there, with Dow King in 10th place in the championship, Maxime Martinez in 11th, J Peaches in 12th, and then beyond J Peaches we have Minisco, who's got 2 points, along with Aaron and Andrew Harper. They both have 2 points each as well, so they are in joint 13th position in the LMP3 championship. But the eyes in that LMP3 class will need to be on Smolder and Bo to see who will come out on top and take that second position in the LMP3 class championship. The GT4 results from round 5 are as follows. You can see Dakuza, they're taking the race win, employing a very, very nice strategy to jumped himself ahead of the other guys in the class in the changing conditions that we had at Road America. So he came away with quite a healthy lead to M-Power of 23 seconds. Scott V was not too far behind with Andrex, Scott's teammate, finishing in 4th place. Pushed him in 5th with Gav, who was a newcomer last time round, finishing there in P6. TPW taking home 7th position with Marauder in 8th. Nyla in 9th position, Brake Check in 10th, and then Carlito was our last GT4 class driver who came across the line, and that has done the following to the GT4 Championship standings. And just like the LMP3 Championship, the GT4 Championship has already been wrapped up with Scott V taking the class win there. He cannot be touched in this round, so he is our GT4 champion. However, once again, there is a title fight between Dakuza and M-Power. You can see there's an 8 points difference between the two, which means that if M-Power was to win the race and Dakuza was to come in 6th position or lower, M-Power would come away with the championship. But if they were to finish on equal points, then it would actually go to Dakuza, as Dakuza has got, well, both drivers have got a win, but Dakuza has got 2 second positions, whereas M-Power currently only has 1. Andrex is there in 4th, Marauder in 5th, Brake Check 6th, Nyla 7th, and you can see the rest of the guys there as well. And then beyond Milo is also Gav, who's got 7 points to his name, and David Simon with 6 points to his name in 13th and 14th positions respectively. Now, let's quickly get onto the qualifying results to look at the grid that we are going to have here as we are just loading up onto the circuit now. Bo actually managed to qualify in pole position in the LMP3 class with Aid the Ace in 2nd, Brzanczyk 3rd, Marco the Pirate in 4th position with Flaming Parrot 5th, Smolder in 6th place, Logan came in 7th, and then Aaron was in 8th place, Minisco was in 9th, and Bernetto was in 10th position. And then when we come to the GT4 class, it was Scott who came away with pole position just ahead of M-Power. Andrex is going to be starting 3rd with Colonel McCoy 4th, Dakuza in 5th place, 6th one to Carlito. Brake Check was in 7th, Marauder in 8th, and Pushdom was their 9th in class. And then also in 10th was Atlas, who was a newcomer here, and Nyla was the man who came in 11th place. Now, we are just going into what seems to be a practice session that I'm hoping that we are seeing here, just allowing the guys to get a moment to basically familiarize themselves with the circuit, get into the groove, get into the flow, double check that all their settings and equipment are all working fine, and just make sure that the setup is all groovy before we actually go racing. And one name that you probably haven't seen, or should I say you shouldn't have seen, in the IMSA Lights Endurance Series previously is this man that we're currently watching here, Jardier. We do have a couple of other drivers participating in this race just for fun for the final round, and I believe that they're going to be in the LMP3 class, but starting from the back of the LMP3 group on the grid in order to basically not influence or not affect the qualifying positions of any of the drivers previously, nor will they actually score any points in this round either, so they won't pick up any championship points, if I remember correctly. Dowking is another one of those drivers, but he has raced previously in this season, and I believe it was last round that he actually competed in. If I just double check my notes, where are you, Dowking? Yes, round 5, you got 4th position last time round, so yep, it's good to see him returning. And there is one other driver, if I can spot him somewhere in the list. I believe it might be Leon the 6th one, but I'm not seeing him. So let's take a look at our drivers as they're out practicing at the moment. We'll bring up the track map and also the speedo there as well. So pushed him. You can see he's driving in the Aston Martin with another Aston Martin just there in front of him of Carlito, giving him some company. And Carlito very sideways there into turn 1, very well held, and you've got quite a bit of damage to the front and the side of his car, and he's going to let, well, I thought he was going to let Pushdom to go through, but evidently not. Atlas, newcomer for this round, is there driving the Aston Martin GT4 car as well. There is another of the new LMP3 drivers, Suomi, who seems to be driving a jet black, almost, I think that might be the carbon fibre delivery Ligier JSP3. And then we've got Marauder, is going to be there in his KTM crossbow, and the KTM isn't really destined to fare too well at this circuit. It's very much a power circuit with the big long straights, and the KTM crossbow is very much a car that likes tight, nimble circuits with lots of nice, tight, twisty corners. It's a very stable car, very good through the turns, but yeah, it doesn't really have the straight line speed of the Aston Martin, the M3, nor the Ford Mustang as well, which are some of the other cars actually participating in this round. So let's see who else we got. There we go, Mr. Van Orman, not Leon the second, my apologies. It was Mr. Van Orman was the other driver who was participating in the LMP3 class as well, as almost a guest alongside Jardier. You see that Beau is out there on track in his Ginetta LMP3 car, just coming onto the banking section here at Daytona. Coming off the infield, there is Jardier currently holding P3 in the session. Smolder is currently holding 4th. He's also in the Ginetta, just like Beau. And then Aid the Ace, our LMP3 champion, is out there on circuit as well. Currently holding a provisional P5 in this session at the moment, but I don't think any of the times that we're actually seeing here in this session are going to matter as such. I do believe that we are going to be forming up in the qualifying positions that they did qualify in last week. There is Aaron parked on the inside of the circuit for whatever reason, but he seems to be parked quite nicely out the way as to not affect any of the drivers coming down into that turn 3 international horseshoe hairpin. But he is back underway. I think he was just parked to the side of the circuit, waiting for us to focus on him to give him some screen time before he gets driving again. There is Logan, our lead coordinator. He's driving his Ginetta. He's also got his teammate of, I believe, Flaming Parrot. Yep, is there behind him as well. So the two guys are running line astern. Who else is in here? Oh, Dawkins just gone and popped himself up into a provisional P2. That's why I saw the names jump. Bonetto is out in his Ligier. And then we've got Andrex, who's currently holding first in the GT4 class. Let's see where the other LMP3 drivers are. So there's Suomi in his all carbon fibre Ligier. There's Jay Peaches. Looks like he's got quite a bit of damage to the front of his United Autosports Ligier, but I'm sure he's not actually running with that damage, and he won't be carrying it to the race, so that's not going to be an issue for him. And there's his teammate Menisco there in the pit lane as well. So let's go back to the GT4 cars actually with Andrex. You can see there on circuit. His teammate Scott is already out there on track, and those guys have wrapped up the team championship for the GT4 class. They did that quite a while ago as well, actually. I believe that was in round 4, maybe potentially round 3. Gav is returning once again. He's out there on track. Dakuza out in his BMW M3. A very lively car, and he put on a fantastic performance in round 5, making a call to stop very early in the transition from wet to dry, and going on to the slick tyre as well before everybody else. He had to battle a very wet circuit for a couple of laps, but by the time that all the other drivers had made their pit stops, once the track had dried out a little bit more, Dakuza had himself a very healthy lead, and he just continued to set very good lap times and extend that lead to take quite a commanding victory in round 5. So it was a very good drive by him. Carlito is out there on circuit. He is in that Aston Martin that we saw earlier, looking a little bit banged up. And there's Empower in his Ford Mustang Boss. It's the older version of the two Ford Mustang GT4 cars. There's a Ford Mustang GT RTR GT4 car, which is the newer, more recently updated version of the Ford Mustang. But Empower has chosen to go with the rather nice blue and yellow distinct livery on the Mustang Boss. It's also using a H-pattern shifter. As you'll see, he'll actually skip the gears, or skip gears when changing down and braking into corners. Obviously going from third down into second, he's only changing one gear, but for the bus stop, for turn 1, and also 3 and turn 5, the International Horseshoe and the Western Horseshoe, he'll be skipping gears when decelerating. This is an interesting technique, but he seems to make it work for him. Let's have a look. Pushdom is out there on circuit as well as brake check. He's got quite a bit of damage there to the front of his Aston Martin, but yeah, they won't be taking that into the race. Nyla is also out there in the KTM Crossbow. She's been running all season, so we may see him struggle, as well as Marauder throughout the race. There is Marauder as well on circuit. Colin is a new name that I don't recognise and haven't seen before, so welcome to you, Colin. Hopefully you fare well here in this final round and have a good time, although that there looked like a very hairy moment and not so much like a good time, but he's done very, very well to hold on to that and make sure to stay out of the way of any other drivers. TPW has managed to make this race. He unfortunately missed last round, so he'll be starting from the back of the usual runners on the grid, but he is saying that the Toyota GT86 GT4 car that he's running there is actually pretty good around this circuit, so it'll be interesting to see what performance that he actually has in that car. There is Atlas, currently sat chilling in the pit lane. Jay Peaches is parked on the inside of turn 6. Yep, there he is. And he's now just gone back to the pits as well. And there's Minisco sat there in the pit lane, as we saw. So we're just waiting on this transition from this session into the actual race. But hopefully in the next 3 to 4 minutes we shall get underway with the formation laps. We'll be taking that green flag, and hopefully we'll have some solid green flag running without any issues during this race. Hopefully this time round, fingers crossed, toes crossed as well, that everything goes all nice and smoothly and we don't have any issues that we experienced last week or experienced last night as well in the GT3 leagues. But yeah, it seemed like there was some general internet issues yesterday evening as Discord was playing up. A number of other services as well went down, and also Instagram as well was reported to have some issues with people trying to connect and see Instagram stories and everything. So we shall ignore these results that we see here on the screen, because this is just a free practice session. We'll be going into the race in just a moment, but it's pretty good to get a rough idea as to what kind of pace the guys have. Jay Peaches and Minisco choosing not to participate in this session. But yes, we are just moments away from going green here with the final round of Season 1 of the Apex Online Racing IMSA Lights Endurance Series. So welcome everybody in the chat. Very good to see you guys tuning in. If you could just give us a quick thumbs up to say that all the audio quality and video quality and everything is looking all good for you guys. That'll be very much appreciated, and obviously your support is very much appreciated. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to the Apex Online Racing channel. That way you won't miss out on any Project Cars 2 or Apex Online Racing leagues or videos in the future. It's a lot of league racing and live streaming that we do here at AOR for a number of various different games, and myself as well also have a YouTube channel. And if you're not familiar with who I am Yorkie065. Links to my channel and also Twitter are down in the description, and obviously I'd very much appreciate it if you did give a thumbs up there and also hit that subscribe button. That would be fantastic and excellent. Glad to hear that everything is sounding and looking all good for you guys as well. That's very pleasing to read. Now I'd like to propose a question to you guys here in the chat. Who do you reckon will take second place in both the LMP3 and also the GT4 Championship? It is between Smolder and Bo, who are separated by a single point. And then there's the battle in the GT4 class between Empower and Dakuza, and they're separated by 8 points now. We're just coming into the first of the 2 formation laps that we'll be doing here. We'll be doing the in-game formation lap just to avoid any potential issues with people picking up penalties or damage really early on, because the formation lap puts the drivers quite nicely separated. So they'll go around and do this one lap, but at the end of the lap they will continue on for the AOR manual rolling start on formation lap that we tend to do across all our Project Cars 2 leagues, and that will allow the drivers to form up in their correct grid positions and allow obviously the guys to prepare themselves for the green flag. And we'll be going racing for 90 minutes here in the session. So I'm seeing a couple of people are predicting Bo taking the LMP3, and Redar Gabriel, I'm hoping I'm not butchering your name, that is putting his money on Empower to take the GT4 class second position in the championship. Some interesting ones there. I certainly think that is going to be very tight between all those drivers, and hopefully you get a good race. It seems that Bo has the upper hand as he is qualifying much further up the field in comparison to Smolder. I believe that Bo was or did qualify on pole position, whereas Smolder was in and around 4th or 5th. So obviously that gives advantage to Bo, and also actually gives him a 1 point bonus point as well. So that actually puts them on equal footing with exactly the same identical 33 points in the championship as well. So that's obviously helped Bo quite nicely, and yeah, will certainly help to actually decide a winner between those two, because providing that both drivers finish, it will mean that one of them will be crowned second place LMP3, whereas if one of the drivers or neither driver was to finish, then Bo would actually end up taking the championship. Or not taking the championship, sorry, because ADS has already claimed the championship. He would take in second position in the championship. But yeah, the guys are still just coming round at the moment on their first of the 2 formation laps. So we'll be going green very soon. You can see the guys just doing a little bit of tyre weaving. We will get the usual light sequence there it begins, but the drivers will not be going on that green light. They will continue to drive round at their usual pace, but I believe that now the guys will form into their actual correct grid position that they actually qualified in on the previous round. So at the moment, Jardier is there just in front of all the other drivers leading the train, but Bo should be coming up through the field relatively soon to take his starting grid position. He's currently got his lights off at the moment, which is a bit unusual. There you go, you see the drivers there slowing down rather nicely to let the guys come through, and that was actually Logan going through on the picture there. He could potentially have some damage on his car somewhere, which would allow and warrant him to actually go through to go to the pit lane to make any repairs. I can't see any obvious damage on his car, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening there. There we go. So Bo's formed up in effectively pole position, with Aid the Ace there in second. Jardier's parked his car over to the side of the road at the moment, as Smolder is making his way through. Currently there in third, but if I do remember correctly, there were a couple of positions who, or a couple of people, sorry, who did qualify in front of him. So hopefully the guys aren't coming flat out around the corners. They're giving each other plenty of room. It seems like everyone is being sensible to avoid giving each other damage. So do just bear with us whilst we actually get these guys formed up in their correct positions. So Aaron is there looking quite nice and slug. That was Bernetto just moving ahead of Dow King, I believe, and also Mr. Van Orman was also in there as well, and Suomi. So those four drivers shall be starting at the back of the LMP3 field, which now has gotten rolling again. That looks like an awful lot of damage to the back of Scott's car. I'm sure he's not actually riding around with that damage that he has there, and that has just been lag on my end that has caused that, which means that if there is any contact for him, it's going to be very, very difficult to actually distinguish whether he has picked up any further damage because of the severity of the damage that is there. But it will make it a little bit easier to actually distinguish his car, I guess, from the rest of the field. There you can see Empower in second, Andrex in third, Dakuza currently in fourth position, and actually Carlito is also another car that's got very severe damage to his car, as well as brake check there as well, but I don't think, as I was saying, it's probably not representative of their actual damage. There's a number of other drivers as well who have all got damage, and actually Logan has gone and been through the pit lane and is parked up there on the exit of the pit lane as well. So he'll be joining onto the back of the LMP3 field once they actually pass through. There you can see Bo just leading the cars at the moment. I'm hoping he hasn't actually got his lights off, and it is just something unusual on my end that is causing it. He's got damage to the front of his car. That will be why, but obviously where he hasn't rushed off to the pits, he won't have actual damage, so that is why we're not seeing headlights for him. The headlights have theoretically, or well, not necessarily theoretically, but incorrectly been broken. So here are the drivers actually forming up in the 2x2 formation as they're coming through the final turn of turn 12, i.e. Speedway 3 and 4, for those of you who prefer the oval racing that tends to happen here at Daytona. And we'll have two separate starts in this. Actually, Aaron's gone and parked up on the side of the field at the bottom of the banking. I'm sure what's happening with him. There he is. That's I think that's just a little bit of lag there. Hopefully no one's incurred any damage because of that. But yeah, Bo at the moment just leading the way. Aaron's just trying to form up in the correct position that he was in previously, which he has done so now. So now the field will bunch up nice and tight again, and now Bo has got his foot flat to the floor, and we are underway racing with the LMP3 grid. Coming hurtling down towards turn 1, everything looks pretty civilized so far and smooth from all the drivers coming through the first turn. You can see Logan sat there on the inside of the pit lane. There's no contact between any of them for the moment, but a relatively clean start for them all. So let's jump up to the GT4 cars as they now get underway as well. and begin their run towards turn 1. And actually Dakuza's looking to the outside of Andrex immediately, and is going to be potentially taking that third position away, but Andrex is going in and trying to defend that. It's right up underneath the rear of M-Power's car. They're going side by side, coming through the left-right kink, or right-left kink, sorry, of turn 2. Now we're into turn 3, into the International Horseshoe, and Dakuza's there on the inside of Andrex, but Andrex is not giving up that third position easily. Going side by side, coming down towards turn 4, the kink. I think Dakuza will have to settle in behind Andrex just for the moment and retain that 4th position that he actually started in. You've got brake check there, relatively close in behind him as well. He's actually managed to make the position on Carlito in the race start. So the driver's well underway. Let's jump back up to the LMP3 field. You see that Aid the Ace has dropped to about a second off the back of Bo. Bo trying to extend an early lead. Smolder has managed to get himself up into 3rd position relatively quickly. He's actually closing very, very quickly up onto the back of Aid the Ace, is looking to pass him with the slipstream around the outside, coming across the start-finish line now to begin our 2nd racing lap. And it looks like that Smolder has managed to get that position on the LMP3 champion, and now he is free to try and hunt down Bo in front of him. So that's been a very, very good start for Smolder, a much better start than he had previously the last time when we were trying to do round 6 on the last round. I'm hoping that Aid the Ace doesn't actually have any damage to his car, but it seemed like there was quite a bit of straight line speed advantage that Smolder had over Aid the Ace, as Aid the Ace comes very, very close to the back of the Ginetta in front of him as they're coming round to turn 6 now to rejoin back onto the banking. We could just see Bo just up in front of us as well, so we're riding on board with P3 just for the moment. We'll keep an eye on this as we come round through speedways 1 and 2 onto the back straight to head towards the bus stop. And it looks like that Smolder has got quite a good run on Bo. Smolder's got a lot of straight line speed and performance in his Ginetta. However, being stuck in that dirty air is costing him quite heavily, and Aid the Ace is now right there up underneath the rear wing of the Ginetta. He's trying to threaten to take that position, so Smolder's done some setup work in comparison to last week, has improved his straight line speed, and there you can see the straight line speed difference between the two drivers. Smolder able to eke out a few car lengths despite Aid the Ace being right there in the slipstream. And they're actually closing up on Bo. Obviously Bo is the one leading the train. He's having to carve his way through the air to create a pocket of disturbed air behind him, which obviously benefits the other cars. But the top 3 all within a second now. Some very, very close racing at the top here by these guys, but at the moment Smolder is looking very, very strong to really try and threaten Bo with that lead that he currently has. We've got Dowking is hunting Jardier there for the battle for 4th position, so these two drivers have managed to make their way through the pack of LMP3 drivers, starting from the back of the LMP3 class, and is now starting to hunt down the guys up in front of him. Jardier currently has a penalty, and it's actually a 5-second penalty that he's got. That could possibly have been for jumping through the bus stop chicane if he had missed his marks there. Looking back up to the front of the LMP3 field, Smolder, Aid the Ace and Bo all in very close proximity to each other, but Smolder goes pretty deep there into the bus stop chicane. That could be a good opportunity for Aid the Ace to close up a couple of car lengths. He's got a good run coming off the corner. Smolder could potentially have to lift here to avoid getting a penalty. It doesn't look like he's going to though. Instead he's just going to continue to hold it down the bottom there towards the apron. Obviously Aid the Ace taking the longer route around the circuit has dropped back. He's now got the slipstream of Smolder there in front of him, which is going to help his straight line speed. As Jardier and Dowking are closing up behind. Here comes Aid the Ace though, trying to get close up into the braking zone of turn 1. Isn't quite able to do anything with it just yet. Having a little bit of a look there into turn 3. Still not really able to properly threaten that second position. Let's go and take a look at the GT4 class, as we have got side-by-side action between the two teammates of Andrex and Scott. Also Dakuza and Empower side by side coming into the bus stop chicane. This is very much a repeat of what we were seeing last week when we tried to run this race. These four guys were going hammer and tongs at each other, trying to take the positions. There was fantastic battling to watch. Scott is right up, sorry, that's Andrex, sorry, right up underneath the rear wing of Scott. But here comes Empower with the run around the outside. He's pulled out of the slipstream, but he's there starting to eke past the two Aston Martins. Dakuza is also there trying to pick up the slipstream and see if he can benefit from it. Empower getting onto the brakes now, trying to go around the outside. That's way too deep though into turn one. That's going to allow both Andrex and also Scott to retain their second positions. He's just about managed to rejoin onto the circuit ahead of Dakuza though, to retake that third position that he was previously holding. It was a little bit deep there in the entry to the International Horseshoe, but was able to bring it back for a tighter later apex. Very good driving between these four drivers. And just quickly before we jump to this battle, Smolder has gone and lost a position to aid the ace somewhere along the line. He has dropped back into third place and has lost touch a little bit to Bo, and Jardier and Dowking are continuing to close up onto the back of Smolder as well. Obviously Jardier and Dowking, very strong competitors in the GT3 field, very fast drivers, and they're proving that they are just as equally quick in the prototypes and the LMP3 class as well here in this race. Mr. Van Ormen has also now managed to clear the other LMP3s as well, as Suomi and Aaron is the next guy, 8th in class, but he is in essentially a net 4th position because of the four drivers, Jardier, Dowking, Mr. Van Ormen and Suomi will not be scoring points in this round. So let's jump back to the GT4 cars as they have come out of the bus stop and now coming through the final turn 12 on towards the start-finish straight. They'll be looking to pick up the slipstream on one another. Scott obviously leading the train. It's creating that pocket of slipstream behind him, and actually Empower's gone and managed to benefit from Andrex not quite pulling out the slipstream quite so early. Will Empower be able to get it slowed down this time? It looks like he's managed to take that second position away from Andrex as well. Dakuza is there towards the exit. Empower got a pretty good drive off the corner, but Andrex has as well, looking into threatening each other, and Empower never looked to the inside of Scott. Andrex looking to the inside of Empower. Dakuza at the moment is just watching the three cars in front of them battling it out, and it's just kind of sat there a little bit more patiently, playing the patient game, potentially waiting for one of these guys to actually make a mistake before gaining a position. See that drive that Empower is getting off of the corner as well, and is actually having to look to the inside of Scott coming onto turn 6, onto the actual bankings there on the inside. Has he been able to get that move done and dusted though? We shall see in just a second. They're there side by side at the moment. Scott has been forced to go to the high line on the banking with Empower there down at the bottom near the apron. That should be the advantage to that Ford Mustang over the Aston Martin, but here comes Andrex and also Dakuza picking up the slipstream off the two guys in front, and actually Scott is doing very well here to hold up alongside Empower as they go side by side coming into the bus stop chicane. They do all fill out and fall into a single file formation to navigate turns 8, 9, 10 and 11 and all come through and out the other side rather nice and cleanly. But they are still very close together, as we can see on the track map. The LMP3 drivers are actually in and amongst the GT4 field now as well with the lap traffic. Here comes Andrex around the outside of his teammate Scott. He's got the run on him. Will he be able to have the run on Empower and be able to make a dive down the outside? Oh, there's contact between the two! Andrex has gone off, and surely that's going to be him in the wall. Very heavy impact between there. I think he just may have lost the car under braking. He'll need to try and rejoin the circuit safely. He is, oh dear, quite a long way off. Oh, that was so very close to making contact there with Bo. That is seriously unfortunate for Andrex, and that was a very heavy rejoin by the veteran, and he's got a huge amount of damage there. You can see he just lost the car once again, coming out the exit, just crawling back onto the circuit, but that's put him well out of contention for this race. I wonder if Empower is okay, and hopefully he hasn't picked up any damage from the contact between Andrex and himself. He seems to be alright at the moment, still leading ahead of Scott and also Dakuza there, still currently holding P1 in class. But that would have been a very, very hairy moment for all four drivers, especially Andrex, and then also for the drivers behind when Andrex was rejoining the track on the outside on the entry to turn 1. So obviously you're fully committed to the brakes there as well. It's very difficult to change your line. Fortunately, no one else was collected in and amongst that, which is good. And actually we're seeing some very close racing action here between Bo, 8th Ace, Dowking and Jardier. Smolder has dropped off. He's now 6 seconds off the lead. Now make that 7. He's caught up behind some GT4 cars as he comes out the exit of the bus stop chicane. Now he'll manage to break free and slip past those guys into clear air, but he is now 9 seconds off of the leader Bo at the moment. He's got Mr. Van Orman for company, and also Suomi is there as well. I'm sure that Smolder is probably just going to let these two guys go and not risk battling with them to potentially, well, yeah, to try and avoid damaging his championship hopes. Obviously, those two drivers, also Jardier and Dowking, they will not be actually earning any points there as Bo is very, very wide coming off the International Horseshoe. It's a sweeping field of cars weaving themselves in and out, in and amongst all the GT4 cars, the GT4 leaders. They've passed Dakuza and Scott there. It's Empower that they've now got to try and navigate through. No, they've got past Empower off the exit of the corner, but now Bo is very much under threat from 8th Ace there, as they're having to dart and weave their way in and amongst the traffic. Very, very good driving and good communication between those guys to avoid running into each other. That would have been a very much heart and mouth moment for those guys. Probably a few grins and a few laughs as well when everyone came out the other side of it cleanly without any scathes on their car. Jardier very, very close to the back of Dowking there. Bo actually closing up an awful lot as well, coming through the bus stop chicane. Let's jump on board with Bo with that rooftop camera, see what kind of straight line speed that he has in comparison to the two Ligiers that are there in front of him. Obviously neither of them will score points in this race, so it's not going to affect Bo in terms of actual points. 8th Ace has dropped well off the back of Bo, coming through the bus stop chicane, and actually Jardier is trying to go around the outside of Dowking coming into the first time. Both of them going side by side. A little bit wiggly there by Dowking under the braking, but for the moment he's going to hold on to that lead, and Jardier is going to slot in behind him, with Bo just watching the two drivers in front. Obviously this might be slightly frustrating for him as seeing them battling and losing a little bit of time, but he himself will not want to be getting involved with that battle to potentially risk any contact which could see him being taken out of the championship fight. Here we see Smolder actually navigating the GT4 leaders as well and getting himself past them, currently holding 7th in class, but obviously that is a net 3rd position. And you can see Suomi and Mr. Van Orman disappearing off ahead. So let's take a look at this GT4 lead. It seems that Andrex has rejoined this group of cars, but obviously he is now a lap or two down and is well out of contention. It's down there in last position at the moment. He's also got a penalty, so Dowking and also Jardier got 3 and 5 second penalties respectively. Marauder there is a 4-second penalty, and Andrex has got a 10-second penalty, which would be for speeding in the pit lane, I imagine, during his pit stop service. That was very, very unfortunate for Andrex to get taken out there. He was kind of in a potential for running for 2nd position in the GT4 class as well. Dakuza has currently 50 points not including the points that he will score in this race in the current position that he actually holds, with Empower with 42 points and then Andrex with 40. So only 10 points between himself and Dakusa, with Empower an 8-second point deficit to Dakusa, who are currently watching in third place at the moment, looking at the back of Andrex's teammate Scott there. In front of him, Empower still leading the GT4 class. Seems like these guys have settled down a little bit as well. So let's take a look at Mr. Van Orman and Suomi. Suomi there in that black Ligier, chasing down Mr. Van Orman there in front of him. And there we can see Bo has dropped off the back of Jardier and Dow King a little bit, but he won't be too worried about that. He'll be more worried about the pace of Smolder, and it seems that he has managed to extend out a decent gap over Smolder on the previous lap as well. Bo's 139.8 to Smolder's previous 141.6, so almost 2 seconds there that Bo extended his lead over the Ligier driver, and Bo actually going and taking the high line. Oh, he's got a slowdown penalty that he's trying to clear here. Saw him jump onto the brakes there. The brake lights flashing up. That could allow 8 the Ace to close up onto the back of Bo. Hopefully Bo is clearing that penalty. He does seem to be back underway with usual racing speed now, and trying to press on like he was previously, but that would have hurt the rhythm of Bo slightly. Let's take a look at Dakusa here, got in the run, using the slipstream of that Ligier there. That's taken the high line around the two GT4 class leaders, and that's allowed Dakusa to pull up alongside Empower and actually clear the Ford Mustang entirely and take the lead coming into turn 1. He'll be able to get it slowed down and hold it, though he's gone out quite deep there on the exit. That could be allowing Empower to go side by side, and yeah, Dakusa has lost the position. He's now got Scott right there on his outside. They're going side by side now as they're coming into the International Horseshoe. Dakusa does have the inside line, but Scott is trying to fight it around the outside. They're going to be side by side coming up towards the kink. There you can see Scott has had to concede the position for the moment to Dakusa and has slotted in behind and following through, but very, very good tactic there by Dakusa to use the slipstream of that passing Ligier coming onto the start-finish straight to help pull himself past the two drivers. It was just unfortunate he wasn't quite able to slow it down for turn 1 and hold on to that lead, but we've got Dow King and Jardier going side by side at the front of the LMP3 field. These two drivers have been going at it, have been very close all race long. Dow King is on the outside with Jardier having the inside line currently in towards turn 1. Dow King trying to carry the speed and momentum through, is taking that wider line, a little bit of a wiggle there through the latter part of the corner. They're still side by side coming through the right left of turn 2, but Dow King does go to concede the position as Jardier chops the nose off the front of the Ligier to take that lead in class, and Dow King has been demoted to second position for the moment as they come through the kink. This is absolutely fantastic racing action that we've got here. This is what multi-class racing is all about. Long endurance races, 60 to 90 minutes, 2 hours and 2.4 hours in the actual full endurance series that we have run previously in AOR, with all the traffic and just battles from start to finish, from lights to flag. Absolutely fantastic stuff. That's what we like to see. So let's take a look at these GT4 cars once again as they are battling for position. Scott is looking very, very close to the back of Dakusa. Dakusa looking to the inside of Empower, coming through the International Horseshoes, going to get the better drive off the corner though. Empower is there on the inside. Surely they're not going to go side by side through the kink. Empower does back out of it and concedes the position for the moment, but he's also had to concede the position to Scott as well, though Empower is going to try and come back around the outside into the Western Horseshoe. Goes a little bit deep though. There is the LMP3 lurking there behind. Be watching these guys and trying to find a way past relatively soon. Now they file themselves into a more single file formation, and the Ginetta LMP3 car will be looking to try and take the high line to pass these guys now. coming out onto the speedway, and he does exactly that, giving them plenty of room down on the bottom there, just in case one of the drivers does decide to come up. However, none of them really got the run over the other to actually try and make a passing up over and overtaking opportunity. Coming into the bus stop now. Dakusa running a little bit deep there in the first part. That's going to make him slow. For the rest, that's going to allow Scott to close right up onto the back of him. He's very close there. Looking to the outside. If we jump to Empower now, he's going to be getting the benefit of the double slipstream off of the two drivers in front of him. So we're right on board with him, so we can see what Scott is doing as he's looking to the outside of Dakusa, as Dakusa's holding that lower bottom line, forcing the Aston Martin to go high. Here comes Empower now with that power from the Ford Mustang that he is driving, looking to the outside of Scott, getting hard on the brakes into turn one. Will he be able to get it slowed down? He does. He manages to make the apex as well and take that second position away from Scott. These guys are chopping and changing lap after lap with their positions, so it's now Dakusa leading from Empower to Scott in third position, and it will probably change once again on the next time round. We come up through the speedway section. Brilliant racing by these guys, as we're seeing Dow King closing up onto the back of Jardier in front of him. He did pop himself momentarily out of the slipstream. In doing so, he has lost a little bit of speed and momentum. He's actually kind of lifting it a little bit there, you can see, just toying with the throttle on that speedo. So he's more just sitting behind Jardier at the moment, just possibly trying to conserve and save fuel and see if he can basically negate any advantage there. You can see Jardier's got 45 litres of fuel left, whereas Dow King has now just gone under 45 litres, so it's about half a tank advantage in Dow King's favour. Obviously, if he can continue to save fuel, then when it actually comes to the pit stop, where they will need to take on fuel to see themselves to the end of the race, Dow King will be needing to take on less, and that will be his advantage. But Jardier gets very crossed up there on the exit onto the banking, and that's allowed Dow King to slip through. I think there may have actually been contact with the wall between Jardier and that concrete barrier up the top there. You see a little bit of damage there on the right hand side, but I think he had damage previously on the rear of his car anyway, so not entirely sure how much damage he's actually incurred from that, but he has gone and lost the lead momentarily. Bo at the moment is still currently sat there in third place, just going about his business, setting his usual lap time. Actually, ADAce has gone and dropped himself down into second position. He's made a mistake somewhere along the line. He did a 42.1 on the previous lap. Smolder is a good 6 seconds behind though, so he's not under threat from him at the moment. Let's jump back up to the GT4 cars, and just as I said last time round, next time that we look at these guys, the next lap round, they will have changed positions, and they have. Empower has managed to get himself back ahead of Scott. There's too many battles to watch and look out for. Ooh! Bo has managed to get himself up past ahead of Dow King and Jardier. I think they may have come across traffic. Yeah, it seems like they have. Bo's got a little bit more experience than these two drivers in multi-class racing, obviously having run the entirety of this season, has probably just used that to his advantage and has managed to gain the place on both of them, unless they were both trying to clear a slowdown penalty. Let's come back to the LMPE, the GT4 cars though, as they are out onto the speedway section, coming down the back straight now, coming into the bus stop chicane. Things looking pretty good for all the drivers. Scott getting a pretty good run, hammering the curbs in his Aston Martin through that sequence of corners there. He'll be trying to pick up that slipstream of Dakusa there in front of him. He'll be trying to pick up the slipstream of Empower in front. There you can see Dakusa closing that gap up onto the back of Empower, but is lifting, coming down onto the start-finish straight, which is allowing Scott to go up around the outside of the BMW. That's second position for the moment, and they are going to hold those positions coming into turn one, as they've got an LMP3 car for company up behind them now. He'll be looking to try and make his way past through these drivers without interfering in their battle or hindering them in any way. He'll probably just wait until the speedway section in order to do that, as it is pretty difficult to pass just one or two drivers coming through into the kink and then coming here into the Western Horseshoe. So for the moment, Empower leads Scott, who leads Dakuza. Very interesting to watch. These guys, they'll be coming onto the banking now as they come through turn 6, get hard on the throttle. And now the Ligier goes to pass and put a lap on the traffic, as there is another Ligier coming up behind as well. Spaced out a little bit more between the GT4 cars. Here comes that Ligier. I think it might be Aaron. In his, it is, yes. Currently last in class, getting very, very close though to the back of Empower. That's actually a car just off there onto the inside. It was one of the GT4 cars. Not entirely sure who. I think that may have been Ticklish Picklewickle. Let's have a look. Yep, I believe it was. But Dakuza is there picking up the slipstream on Empower, coming onto the start-finish straight. He's got the run. Scott is closing up on the two guys in front of him as well, also picking up that slipstream. So P1 in the GT4 class goes to Dakuza momentarily. Empower getting early on the brakes as brake check is coming out of the pit lane on driver's left. He won't interfere and feed into the back of these guys. He'll probably just slot in behind them. Yep, there we go. So it won't upset any of these three drivers, but Dakuza has now got himself back up into the lead, just ahead of Empower. Scott still holding on there on the back. Let's have a look at the rest of the GT4 field. So Gav is currently holding P4 in class at the moment. Pushtum is there in 5th with Carlito, just half a second behind. Pretty close between these two drivers for 5th and 6th position in the GT4 class. Atlas is there running in 7th place with Marauder just behind, just under a second. He'll lose a little bit of time to the Aston Martin in front of him due to the low power of that KTM. There is Nyla currently holding P10 with Colin there in 10th position. I want to say Colonel McCoy, but he does not appear to be running, unless Colin has changed his name to Colonel. Unless Colonel McCoy has changed his name to Colin. That could be a possibility. But yeah, brake check in 11th position. There is Andrex. He's managed to get himself up past TPW, as TPW is coming out of the pit lane. I'm assuming to repair some damage. So let's take a look, as it seems that Scott is behind Empower, behind Dakuza, behind Empower. Let's take a look at the LMP3 drivers. Bo is back into 3rd place as Dowking and Jardier have got themselves back up ahead of the Ginetta driver. But Mr. Van Orman is now there in 4th position with Suomi in 5th, just clearing that GT4 car battle this time round. The drivers stay as they are as they come into turn 1. So Smolder is there currently in 7th position, but a net 3rd place, taking a very nice apex. 8 the Ace is not too far up in front of him though. It seems like 8 the Ace has had another troublesome lap previous time round, with a 42.1, whereas Smolder has done a 40.5. So very good job by him to close that gap up. It could possibly have been due to traffic or a potential mistake from 8 the Ace somewhere along the line, or potentially even trying to clear a slowdown penalty beat. And now seems that Smolder's got caught up behind the Aston Martin there in front of him. He might try and see if he can get the run off the Western Horseshoe, which he does, to clear him before they get to turn 6 and head out onto the banking. Flaming Parrot is currently there in P8 in the LMP3 class, with Minisco in P9, not too far behind Flaming Parrot. Gap's just lurking around 3.5 to 4 seconds at the moment. And then Logan is a little bit behind him, about 16-17 seconds off the back of Minisco, whereas Aaron is quite a bit further down the field, another 23 to 24 seconds back. And then Bernetto is 7 seconds off behind them, and has also been lapped by the LMP3 leaders as well. So let's take a look once again at this GT4 battle, and actually M-Power is picking up the slipstream off the back of the Ligier of Aid the Ace there, just kind of negating Dakuza getting the slipstream. He's not really close enough, and M-Power's not really close enough either for Dakuza to benefit from a double slipstream, so gap hasn't really changed that too much between those. Between those two drivers. Smolder is now trying to work his way through the GT4 class to get a little bit crossed up there on the run down to the kink. He'll be passing Dakuza now. He'll need to back out a little bit and currently hold station behind M-Power. He'll just follow him through for the moment and then probably go to pass off the exit of the Western Horseshoe here. There he goes off to M-Power's right, and he'll slot himself and try and pursue down Aid the Ace, but with that he's actually gone and lost an awful lot of time as well. He was in and around 2.5 seconds behind Aid the Ace. The gap has now increased once again back up to 5.5 seconds or so. So Smolder's lost out an awful lot just trying to navigate that traffic there. Excuse me. How much penalty does M-Power have? He currently has a 3-second penalty that he has picked up. Very interesting. That was probably from navigating the bus stop chicane somewhere along the line. That's usually the place where it's very easy to pick up a penalty, but obviously with the two GT4 drivers of Dakuza and Scott just behind him, he would have obviously not really wanted to give up track position, and instead will just try and make up the gap that he needs to negate that some other way. And Power picking up the slipstream of Colin there to put a lap down on the Aston Martin driver. Dakuza closing up quite substantially in the slipstream there. They're kind of leaving Scott behind at the moment. Scott is about 1.5 seconds off the back of Dakuza now. As the two guys in front of him continue to turn identical laps on the previous lap time, both of them doing a 1:52.220, and then Scott only losing out on 0.4 of a second. But yeah, that gap has extended out from those drivers. Let's see what else we have here. Pushton is still hunting down Carlito. Actually, no, these two drivers are swap positions. Carlito was chasing down Pushton previously, if I remember correctly. So Carlito's managed to get himself now up into 5th position in class. Pushton has lost the position somewhere along the line. Let's take a look at the LMP3 field once again. And actually, Bo has lost the positions to Mr. Van Olmen and Suomi. His previous lap time is a 1:43.2, which isn't ideal. He is looking to come into the pit lane now as well to make an early stop. So was that because of traffic, or has he actually had an incident, potentially with some contact somewhere, that has incurred damage to him? Obviously he's been running the entirety of the race for us without headlights, but that was from the formation lap. I doubt that was actually just actual contact with someone or something, but he's now got those headlights repaired. He's obviously taking on the fuel that he'll need to go the remainder of the race distance. I believe it is 85 litres of fuel that the LMP3 cars can hold, and I am correct in that assumption. So just seen there one of the drivers in the pit lane there. So it looks like we've got a retiree already. We did start the race with 26 drivers. We're down to 25. So someone has retired somewhere along the line, but Bo now exits the pit lane. Be interesting to see the gap between himself and also Smolder, his championship rival, who is the next driver up the field. Smolder is just coming through turn 6 now and joining onto the banking section. And there you can see the gap at the top of the screen between Smolder and Bo. It's currently lurking at 29 seconds between the two. Smolder is obviously still yet to make his pit stop, but now that Bo's got some clear air, it's obviously got rid of the 4 guest drivers that we have here for this race. with Jardier, Dowking, Mr. Van Orman and Suomi, who won't be scoring points. Actually, I think Dowking might still score points. He has run previously in the season. He ran in the previous round and did score the 5 points that he got from the 4th position that he earned in that race. So I think it's just, yeah, Jardier, Mr. Van Orman and Suomi who won't be scoring points. But yeah, currently Bo is up there looking like... Sorry, I'm a little bit tired. Looking like that Bo will potentially take the race win somewhere along the line. Mr. Van Orman is relatively close to the back of Dowking. There you can see. As you see, Suomi sliding through the picture there with a nice bit of a 4-wheel drift. Here is the GT4 cars managing to extend that gap to Scott to around about 4 seconds, but the Kuza is still right there on the tail of M-Power, and M-Power does have that 3-second penalty that we saw last time round. We're seeing Bo in the background trying to work his way past Scott as well. I imagine he's managed to clear him. Well, not quite actually. Coming into the International Horseshoe. He has now though getting a drive off of the corner. And good question, White Ghost. Can Andrex lose his 4th position? So Andrex currently has 40 points in the championship. Marauder is the next driver in 5th place, and he's got 38 points. So it's only 2 points difference between the two of them. However, Marauder is now behind Andrex. So currently Andrex is on to retain that 4th position in the championship. His next closest rival is a further 7 points behind with Breakcheck, who's currently on 31 points in the championship, and Breakcheck is actually the next driver up the road for Andrex, just under 8 seconds up there. There you can see him. So it looks like that Andrex should be able to, providing that he can clear Marauder and Breakcheck and continue to finish the race, he should hold on to that 4th position. I think currently in the positions that they are in, if Andrex was to end up retiring and Breakcheck was to finish in 10th place, Breakcheck will get 3 points, and if Marauder was to finish 11th in class, he would get 2 points, which would put him equal pegging with Andrex. However, Andrex does have a 2nd position to his name, which he got in round 1. So with that, he will retain that 4th position, which is good. It's useful for him. But yeah, so it looks like Andrex is in pretty good stead to hold on to that 4th position that he has in the championship. And there we see a Jardier and Dowking going side by side across the start-finish line between the two drivers. Jardier's going around the outside though, but he's going to have to hold it around there. Giving him a little squeeze to Dowking on the inside. Very, very close to making contact between the two of them. This giving Mr. Van Orman the opportunity to close up onto these two guys as well. And Jardier has taken the lead in the race, but he's gone and spun it coming out of the International Horseshoe. He's just gone and dropped the car entirely. Be careful of the drivers rejoining. He does manage to get and keep the car over to the right-hand half of the circuit. He will try and sneak back past Gav though, around the outside in the kink. But that's dropped Jardier from a momentarily lead in LMP3 down into 4th position, as Suomi did manage to pass him, but Suomi is only there just under 2 seconds up the road from Jardier now. So he's got a bit of a target to chase. Smolder is still running there in 5th position at the moment. He's got a gap of 33 seconds now to Bo. Very, very interesting to see that Smolder has managed to increase the gap between them. This could potentially help him when it comes to the pit stops. Didn't quite see how much time that Bo actually lost when he made his stop, but 8 the Ace is now just over 4 seconds behind Bo, so I'm assuming that 8 the Ace has made his stop in this race as well. And you can see him just well off in the distance. Mr. Van Ormen now is looking to threaten Dowking, trying to pick up that slipstream and is being forced to go higher up and around the outside in the banking into turn 1. Coming onto the brakes now though. It's looking very, very steady for both the two drivers. Dowking taking a nice tight line to defend that lead that he currently holds. Mr. Van Ormen just slopping in behind for the moment. And actually there's been a change at the head of the GT4 field as well. D'Couza's managed to get himself ahead of M-Power, and in that change of position they have not really lost too much time to Scott behind either. In fact, the gap has continued to increase. It's now locking up around 2.5 seconds. So at this phase of the race, D'Couza and M-Power seem to have the measure over Scott and is extending that gap out in the previous lap round. You can see that the difference between the two lap times with M-Power and D'Couza both in the low 53s, whereas Scott was in the low 55s, so a good 2 seconds difference there that they lost, or Scott lost on the previous time round. So Scott may have actually closed up onto the back of these two drivers on the previous lap off camera, but has obviously gone and lost that once again. But we're seeing here M-Power picking up the slipstream of D'Couza there in front of him. It's coming through turn 12 on towards the start-finish straight. He's not really picking up too much of an advantage over the BMW at the moment. Coming through, M-Power lifting and coasting a little bit. There you can see currently holding second place and then drops down into second place. That was what I was talking about earlier with M-Power using a H pattern gear shifter, and rather than heel towing and shifting down through the gears sequentially like you would usually, going from 6th to 5th to 4th to 3rd to 2nd, he just skips gears. So he just purely focuses on the braking, brings in the clutch, and then obviously slots the car, or slots the gear that he needs just as he goes to turn in or through the mid corner there, as D'Couza gets very, very crossed up on the exit of the Western Horseshoe, allowing M-Power to close up a car length or two onto the back of him. D'Couza actually feeling threatened and having to go defensive there. Coming through turn 6, M-Power's got a bit of a run here, as you can see, looking to pick up that slipstream. I think D'Couza is just inviting him to go and take that lower line. What is actually the fuel load difference between the two? So M-Power, we can see there, has got 30.5, 30.6 litres. D'Couza has 34.5 litres, so a good 4 litres difference between the two drivers. Obviously D'Couza spent the majority of the race following in the slipstream of Scott, Andrex and M-Power in front of him, as there goes Dowking and also Mr. Van Ormen as well. D'Couza was forced to hold a slightly higher line there to let the two Ligiers go through off the exit of the bus stop chicane, but yeah, D'Couza has managed to save some more fuel over M-Power, which will probably fare in his favour when it actually comes to the pit stops and taking fuel on board. Let's jump on up to Mr. Van Ormen and Dowking as they're side by side coming into the first turn. Mr. Van Ormen, though, having to slot in behind the Ligier there in front of him. Is very, very close between the two as they now come into the International Horseshoe. Mr. Van Ormen be looking to try and do the switchback, try and focus on getting that good drive coming off the corner using the full width of track available to him. We do have Nyla there in the KTM in front. Ligier drivers choosing to back out and just follow him through, but will go to pass him coming into the Western Horseshoe, as both drivers are looking very, very lively under braking then through the actual turning point of the corner. And again, Dowking getting very, very sideways there coming through turn 6. Coming out onto the banking though, getting a pretty good run, getting the traction that he needed coming off the corner to hold the couple of car lengths that he has over Mr. Van Ormen at the moment. But surely Mr. Van Ormen will close these up as they approach the bus stop chicane. Dowking looking a little bit defensive, but then comes to retake the racing line. Hasn't quite managed to get the line that he wanted coming through the corner. This is allowing Mr. Van Ormen to get a brilliant run coming off of the corner. I think Mr. Van Ormen nailed that there, and Dowking, I think, actually potentially may have got a slowdown penalty and instead is letting him go. There's a flash of lights there from Mr. Van Orman. Not entirely sure what that is for exactly. It could just be indicating it's coming into the pit lane. Both drivers are actually coming into the pit lane. Suomi is going through and continuing on his way. He's got 6.4 litres, whereas Mr. Van Orman has got 4.6. And Dalking, where are you? It's got 7.6 litres as well. Jardier is now also into the pits with 7 litres of fuel. So these guys are in making their pit stops. No, do not say it is. Do not say I just saw who I thought I saw in the pit lane there. I think I just saw Bo parked in the pit lane, retired. I did not see him in the standings. Jardier has just gone straight through the pit lane without stopping. Interesting. I'm guessing that he completely missed where his pit marker is, but it seems like Bo has retired from this race and is no longer running or participating. I'm trying to find a driver who is in the pits and can give us that view. Currently there is the Kuza. He's in the pit lane serving his stop, so he's actually trying to leapfrog Empower. Here comes Bo now coming out of the pit lane. There's a retired car there. That's not Bo's car though. Bo is in the Ginetta, but I do not see him in the standings. We have gone from 25 drivers down into 4, so that is a real shame to see Bo having to retire in this race. Not entirely sure what for. I'm hoping that he will appear in chat sometime relatively soon to let us know what's happened to him, but that is devastating because the way it stands at the moment is Smolder will hold on to second place in the LMP3 Championship and will take that second place. I do believe that Bo will hold on to third though, as Brzanczek is 13 points behind, and yeah, the most points that an LMP3 driver can score in any one round is 11 points, 10 points for getting the race win, and then the 1 bonus point for qualifying on pole position, which Bo did anyway. So he has claimed that point, and he's got himself ahead of well, he's got himself equal footing with Smolder. So if Bo is going to take second place in the championship, then he's got to hope that Smolder has an issue and is forced to retire from the race. But yeah, very, very unfortunate for Bo. That's a real shame for him. Would have loved to have seen him continue to make it to the end of the race and get there and fight for that second position to the flag. But Jardier, as we just seen, is serving his pit stop, but with that second trip through the pit lane, he has gone and lost the position to aid the ace now. But Dalking is still chasing the back of Mr. Van Orman after they had swapped round just before the pit stops. Gav is also there into the pit lane as well. I'm trying to see if I can pick up another shot of Bo somewhere along the lines. Obviously Smolder's made his pit stop. Aid the Ace has done his. He did his earlier, not too long after Bo did his. Aid the Ace has he's got his windscreen wiper on there for some reason. It's certainly not raining. There was no rain forecasted for this race, so unusual for him to be doing that. But yeah, Dalking looking to the outside of Mr. Van Orman, coming towards the bus stop. It's really difficult to go side by side coming through the actual bus stop chicane itself. Instead, Dalking choosing caution to slot in behind Mr. Van Orman for the moment. Here is Scott coming into the pit lane. I did not get a shot there either. I think that Bo's car is either at the very beginning of the pit lane. I'm not going to get it from that angle. Is either right at the beginning of the pit lane, or he has actually left the session now as well, and his car is no longer there. So I'm just essentially looking for a ghost. But Dalking was getting pretty close to the back of Mr. Van Orman coming into turn 1, but not close enough to make the move. We're seeing Flaming Parrot though closing up onto the back of Minisco. Another 2 pair of drivers who are in pretty close proximity. Otherwise, everyone else has kind of spread themselves out a little bit now that Dakuza has made his pit stop and dropped off the back of M-Power to give himself the clear air. So I think Dakuza is probably just trying to make the undercut in terms of strategy, get himself that clear air. Yeah, he has a good 29.5 seconds to Scott in front of him, so he can just focus on putting in the lap times that he needs in order to try and jump M-Power. And they're pretty equal on the previous lap, both in the 152.7, so no time lost between the two for the moment. Obviously with Dakuza making his pit stop, that has gone and relieved M-Power of that pressure that he had previously on his shoulders with the BMW driver right behind him. Let's take a look at these two guys once again. And actually Flaming Power and also Minisco are going side by side into turn 1 there. It looks like that Minisco is now in 7th position with Flaming Power there in 8th, but Flaming Power is having a little bit of a look to the inside of him as they're navigating a little bit of traffic as well. It's very, very close, coming off the back of, or the off the corner of turn 3. It's not going to be close enough though to potentially make a move coming into turn 5. He's having a look though, and he's going for that move. Actually, he's going for it. He's gone very, very deep though, and he's gone too deep and off onto the grass, and that has unfortunately gone and dropped him a whole bunch of time off the back of Minisco. Minisco saw that one coming and gave him the room, so there's no contact between the two. For a moment I thought that Flaming Parrot may have been able to do that, but obviously in the latter part of the braking he just wasn't quite able to get the car slowed down enough, and obviously ended up running too deep into the corner. And I'm just hearing from Gixxer saying that Bo's screen has froze up, which is really, really unfortunate to hear. As I said earlier, it would have been nice to see him go to the flag and fight for that second place in the championship on track. As we're seeing Dowking having a look to the outside of Mr. Van Orman. But yeah, that is a crying shame for Bo, as his only hope now is that Smolder doesn't make it to the end of the race. How many LMP3 drivers are there? There's 11 LMP3 drivers at the moment. So if Bo has any hope, he's got a hope that one of the other LMP3 drivers retires, like now, and that Smolder retires before he gets to 90% of the race distance. Because if Smolder does make that 90%, he will hold on to whatever championship points in the position that he would finish in with the other drivers going around on the circuit, which probably would be 10th place if one of the other drivers was to retire. So yeah, that is Bo's only hope, unfortunately. Still watching Dowking at the moment. Just obviously lost touch to Mr. Van Orman a little bit, but Mr. Van Orman is being held up quite severely now coming through turn 6 by the traffic. There's one of the LMP3 drivers and also a GT4 car there as well. That's helped in Dowking's favour and allowing him to close up. So we're coming into the final 31 minutes now of this race. We've done almost an hour of racing, and you see Dowking there getting quite the slipstream and quite the run off the speedway corner there. Close up onto the back of Mr. Van Orman, so he's certainly got the straight line speed over that LMP3 class leader, but Dowking was there looking quite squirmy through the bus stop chicane, losing out on that aerodynamic performance and testing the track limits. It doesn't look like he has picked up a penalty though, or if he has, he's completely ignoring the slowdown warning that he would have up on screen currently, and instead is continuing to try and pressure Mr. Van Orman as they make the approach now towards turn 1. I don't think he's going to be close enough though in order to make the move, so he's just going to follow him through. Let's actually run through a penalty update. So Mr. Van Orman has got 2 seconds to his name, Dowking 4, Suomi also has 2 seconds, Jardier has 5 seconds to his name, so that penalty hasn't increased for him. since we saw towards the beginning of the race. Aaron has 3 seconds. Empower has a 3-second penalty, as we had previously as well. Scott, though, now has a 1-second penalty, which he didn't previously. Atlas has a 2-second penalty, as well as Gav, Nyla. Andrex now has a 12-second penalty. He's got himself ahead of Marauder, which we saw anyway. I think he's still trying to hunt down Brake Check in front of him. But yeah, Andrex did, I believe, pick up a 10-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. He's obviously now got a further additional 2 seconds for track limits infringement. So let's actually take a look to see where Andrex is in relation to Brake Check. Currently in and around 2.5 seconds between the two drivers, and Andrex taking 1.2 seconds out of Brake Check on the previous lap. So in the next lap or so, it'll be very, very close between these two, but it's very, very close between Aid the Ace and Jardier. Jardier is going around the outside of Aid the Ace, coming on the run towards the bus stop chicane. Also seeing Minisco and Flaming Parrot, also pretty close proximity there. I'm seeing the leaderboard, as well as obviously Mr. Van Orman and Dow King. But Aid the Ace wouldn't have put up too much of a fight and just let Jardier go through, and will instead just use the slipstream to try and continue to eke out the gap to Smolder behind him, which seems to be lurking in and around 10 seconds at the moment. So let's take a look at Minisco and Flaming Parrot. The gap is around about half a second. We saw Flaming Parrot make the dive down the inside of Minisco, coming into the, well, that previous corner that they've just been through. I thought they were going through the International Horseshoe, but they weren't. They were going through the Western Horseshoe. But yeah, he ran a little bit too deep and got onto the grass on the outside, which saw him dropping off the back, and obviously losing the position that he had very momentarily gained. Is it actually? Oh, sorry, as Empower is now into the pit lane as well. So he's in there getting his fuel that he'll need to make to the end of the race. Where is Dakuza in relation to him? Dakuza's out on the back straight by the just going through the bus stop chicane. So Empower has lost the position to Scott, but that is very interesting. I'm trying to figure out why the guys have moved around quite as much as they have. So Scott has made his stop. I think Empower's just taken on too much fuel, or has had to take on way more fuel than Scott has needed to. So that's where the position has changed there. I don't think either of the two drivers have taken tyres, but I think Dakuza may have taken tyres in his pit stop, because the gap is in and around 20 seconds between himself and Empower after coming out of the pit lane. 21 seconds to be a little bit more accurate. And then the pit stop tyre changes is usually around 14 to 16 seconds in length, and obviously when you're stationary at that time as well, you lose that little bit extra in the pit lane. So I think Dakuza may have taken tyres in his pit stop, but that has seen him drop way off the back of Empower and Scott in front of him. Mr. Van Orman and Dowking, though, are going side by side and battling away, coming through turn 6. Mr. Van Orman trying to go for a bit of a switchback here off the exit onto the speedway and oval section, but for the moment we'll slot in behind Dowking and pick up that slipstream. It'll be interesting to see just how powerful that slipstream is for Mr. Van Orman. He's looking to the inside, coming towards the bus stop chicane, trying to force it down the inside. Dowking's defending it, though. Wasn't quite able to get up in and alongside enough to warrant the commanding position for the corner. Dowking again having to go defensive and get in onto that bottom line much sooner in the banking section to prevent Mr. Van Orman from coming through the inside there. But Mr. Van Orman is getting that slipstream coming off the banking. We've got a little bit of traffic up here in front of us, though, as they're looking to go side by side. They're going to need to be cautious with that Aston Martin there coming into turn 1, and actually Dowking dives onto the brakes much earlier than Mr. Van Orman. Mr. Van Orman tries to hold it around the outside. They're now going to have to try and navigate that Aston Martin, and Mr. Van Orman does take that position and take the lead in the LMP3 class, with Dowking dropping back and conceding position momentarily, going into second as they're now lapping one of the LMP3 cars. He does a good job of getting out of the way, and then is also going to slot themselves past Andrex as Dowking nips up the inside through the kink. Very, very close between the Aston Martin and the Ligier there. Mr. Van Orman is locking his front left tyre a little bit as well, coming through or into the braking zone of the International Horseshoe. So the Ace is continuing to just sit there behind Jardier and using him to help pull himself along, and the gap between Minisco and Flaming Parrot hasn't really changed all that much either. It's still lurking in and around half a second or so. There's a little bit of slipstream. You can see M-Power in the background of the shot there. Scott having just gone through, very bottom of the screen. Flaming Parrot will be looking to see if he could potentially make a move coming into turn 1. He'll have the slipstream on that Ligier in front of him. He's within half a second, but Flaming Parrot will be picking up the slipstream on the 2 lap cars in front of him. But Flaming Parrot is going to get the run here on Minisco as Minisco got onto the brakes, but now he's boxed in a little bit by Scott there. Oh, that's very, very close there between the 2 LMP3 drivers that go around and navigate around the outside of Scott coming into turn 1. I'll hold him up a little bit as Flaming Parrot's a little bit slow through the apex, but that was almost the position gifted to Flaming Parrot of Minisco. Getting on the brakes now, Flaming Parrot's gone too deep. Keep it out of the wall! Oh, he hasn't been able to do that and makes contact with the tyre barrier there. There's going to be some aero damage to the front of his car, potential front left suspension damage as well. Careful when you rejoin onto the circuit there, mate. And yeah, it looks like he's got quite substantial damage. As you can see, his steering wheel is now off centre, and he's having to fight the car with it crabbing a little bit as well. So that's taken Flaming Parrot out of contention of 7th position with just that one simple mistake. He's got a bit of lap traffic there behind him, and his teammate Logan is going to be closing up behind with that. Gav is now actually closed up onto the back of Carlitos, going deep though into the bus stop chicane. Just about manages to gather it back up though and keep it on the circuit without too much drama. But Carlito has managed to nip Gav in the pit stops. He's got 44 litres of fuel on board, whereas Gav has got 56, as you can see. And now, oh dear! Flaming Parrot has just gone skyrocketing up through the air somehow. Not entirely sure how. We're just caught in mid-air, coming and crashing back down hard. He has gone and lost the front and also the rear bumper. Is that potentially? I think he may have been struggling with the steering of the car and potentially hit the wall. His teammate Logan has gone through. It seems like Logan is unscathed by that, but yeah, I think Flaming Parrot possibly just carrying a little bit too much speed with the damage that he has, lost control and hit the wall. He's gone and flipped the car and incurred even more damage. It's going to be pretty frustrating from him as Aaron has now just gone through, demoting Flaming Parrot into 10th place. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Flaming Parrot actually comes in and parks the car. He does have a minute in hand to Bernetto behind him, but that damage there that he has is quite substantial, and it's going to take quite a while in order to repair. As we're seeing brake check pretty close to the back of Atlas, and actually Andrex has managed to get himself past brake check as well. That's going to help him secure that 4th position in his championship. But yeah, he's also obviously managed to get past Atlas. As Flaming Parrot is now in the pit lane to repair that damage and get some new bodywork. So let's jump on board for a moment with Dow King chasing down Mr. Van Orman, and let's stick with him for a lap and just enjoy the sounds as well, we will do in a minute if Dow King wasn't closing up quite so much onto the back of Mr. Van Orman. Just kind of having a little bit of a look there into turn 1, but isn't really close enough. So yeah, let's enjoy the sounds of them coming through this infield section. Dowking and Mr. Van Orman providing you with the sound and the action here at the Daytona International Speedway. As Dowking is looking to the outside, getting the run off of the bus stop chicane, and has made the move around the outside, and Dowking takes that lead in the LMP3 class. Mr. Van Orman conceding the position. Dowking making very good use there of the slipstream. Almost got the move done into the bus stop chicane on the outside there, but didn't quite have the track position and had to momentarily drop in behind, but got the good run through that bus stop and off the exit and through the final turn 12. But Mr. Van Orman is not going down without a fight. Very, very close there to the back of Dowking, as we see coming into turn 6 and back out onto the speedway. A couple of car lengths between the two Ligier drivers. Fantastic battling between these two guys at the head of the LMP3 field. You see Mr. Van Orman has dropped off the back of Dowking a little bit. He is still pressing on. He's got the slipstream, but he'll be in the dirty air coming into the bus stop chicane, so he needs to make sure that he nails all the apexes and everything, which he does so beautifully, and gets a good drive through turns 8, 9, 10 and 11. He's now in prime position to pick up the slipstream off of Dowking. We've also got some lap traffic up ahead as well. I think that may be one of the GT4 cars, considering the closing speed that we have. Mr. Van Orman now is starting to eke that gap down between the two drivers. He may try and force the issue with that lap car in front. He's having a look to the outside. He's going for that move as he gets onto the brakes a little bit later. That KTM is there. It's holding up both drivers a little bit. Dowking managing to get away with it though, as Marauder in this KTM crossboat was kind of forced to take to the middle of the track. Mr. Van Orman was forced to go deep and very wide through turn 1. That allowed Dowking to retain the position. That almost worked in Mr. Van Orman's favour, but it didn't quite pay off in the end there. He's actually lost out a little bit as well, the gap extending to just over half a second, as we've got Nyla in the pit lane. He's coming down to, well, he's actually coming out of the pits now, out onto pit exit, so he's obviously had some potential work done to his car. I believe we've lost Flaming Parrot as well earlier on, when he had taken on that huge damage that we saw him come into the pits to serve. Someone was asking about the fuel load of Andrex. There you can see he's got 26 litres of fuel left, and I'm pretty sure he should be able to make the remainder of the race distance on that. Dakuzo's got 32 litres, as we can see there. His lap time a little bit slower than mPower. Previously the gap is still lurking in around 26.5 seconds, so he's not making any headway there. mPower's got 33 litres of fuel. Scott has got 29. I'm wondering actually if Andrex does have enough fuel to go to the end. Pushdim's on 27 litres. Carlito's quite a bit safer on 34. Gab is very safe on 46. Brake Check has got 36 litres. Atlas is on 32, and these two drivers have also swapped position as well. Brake Check has managed to get the measure over Atlas and taken that 8th position in class away from him. Marauder is there on 36 litres of fuel, and Nile is on 27 with Colin on 43. So Colin seems pretty safe. It could be quite marginal for Andrex in terms of running it to the end, but he has a wise head on him. He'll be watching that fuel load. He'll be calculating how much he needs to be using per lap in order to make it to the finish, and I'm sure he'll be adjusting his driving in order to suit. But mPower is now closing up onto the back of Scott for the lead in the GT4 class. He's picking up the slipstream as we are coming across the start-finish line to begin yet another lap for the GT4 cars. Good lap there by mPower on the previous time round, but he's having to get onto the brakes early, such as the speed in that Ford Mustang. Having a little bit of a look to the outside in turn 1, but wasn't really able to do anything with it, with Scott defending the inside line quite nicely to hold on to that lead in class. Let's very quickly jump up to Mr. Van Orman, who is out on the speedway section coming through the final turn towards the start-finish straight. He's trying to pick up that slipstream of Dowking there in front of him this time round. They don't have a car in front to interfere with their battle coming into the first turn. Will Mr. Van Orman go for the move? No, he does not. He instead just backs off for the moment, but Dowking goes a little bit deep there, coming through the exit of turn 1. This is going to be side by side between the two drivers. This is for the lead in the LMP3 class. Mr. Van Orman on the outside into the International Horseshoe. Dowking has got the inside line there, but Mr. Van Orman is trying to hang it around the outside, trying to get that drive off of the corner. He's going to have the inside for the kink. I think he has just about managed to eke ahead. Dowking following him through for the moment, but will he go for the lunge back down the inside? Mr. Van Orman going very, very deep there into the Western Horseshoe. The guys are still going side by side, coming through the infield section with 12 minutes remaining in the race, and they've got the Kuza there just in front of them. Oh, that was so very close between Mr. Van Orman and Dowking. That was literally a hair length between the two of them, coming off the exit of the corner there as they came up onto the back of the Kuza, coming out onto the speedway section. They're both continuing to press on though, and Dowking hasn't lost too much time. He's actually picking up a bit more slipstream over Mr. Van Orman coming towards the bus stop chicane. They do have some lap traffic there in front of them, so this could work in both of their favour. Mr. Van Orman getting the favourable run though, coming off of the bus stop chicane. It's allowed him to eke out a couple of car lengths over Dowking, who was running in that dirty air. Now they're taken to the high line to pass those GT4 cars. Mr. Van Orman diving down to the low line to break that toe from Dowking and give a little bit more of a toe to the GT4 cars that he is passing. He's just got one more car of Andrex behind him. Mr. Van Orman getting very early on the brakes. Dowking having a look around the outside of Mr. Van Orman coming into the first turn, but isn't quite going to be able to make the move stick, as Mr. Van Orman did a very good job of holding that defensive inside line and holds on to the position at the moment. They both do manage to navigate Andrex quite cleanly there without interfering with him, nor Andrex really interfering with this battle too much. Obviously Mr. Van Orman got onto the brakes pretty early in order to avoid running into the back of the Aston Martin in that first turn. Dowking much tidier to the apex there, coming through turn 5, now coming into turn 6. It is very close once again, less than a car length between the two of them as they come off of the corner and onto the banking section. Let's take a very quick look to see where Empower and Scott are. They are just a bit further up the road, coming through the bus stop chicane. That's a big cut there by Empower though. Surely that is going to be him having to lift. He's got the run coming off the corner over Scott, and he has taken that lead in class at the moment, but that certainly looked like he was out of track limit bounds to me. But Scott is now coming back at him underneath, coming onto the start finish straight, as we see Dowking has gone and lost the ground to Mr. Van Orman. There is Scott now lifting to try and Empower now lifting to try and negate that cut track penalty and avoid getting any further time penalties added to his name. So he does concede that lead once again. Let's do another penalty update. So Mr. Van Orman's got 2 seconds to Dowking's 4, so he's got 5. Jardier's now got 10 seconds, so it's another 5 seconds that he's incurred somewhere along the line. Aaron has still got his 3 seconds. Scott has got 1 second, and Empower's now got 5 seconds worth of penalties. It was previously 3 from what I remember, so he has incurred more time penalty there, which is going to make it ever more difficult to try and pass Scott and then extend out the 4-second lead that he'll need to clear Scott's penalty. There is less, well, there's 9 minutes and 30 seconds remaining in the race, and then obviously the lap that the countdown timer reaches 0, the remainder of that lap will also count in this race. So he hasn't got a huge amount of time in order to do it. Atlas and Brake Check are still battling away there, as we can see. Still in relatively close proximity. Brake Check is starting to eke away from Atlas ever so slightly. That was Colin going a little bit deep there with Dakuza just behind him. Dowking just coming off the bus stop chicane He has lost touch a little bit to Mr. Van Orman, but M-Power and also Scott that we can see there just up the road are side by side. This could cause problems potentially for Mr. Van Orman, whereas Mr. Van Orman is going to go, he's going to go low to the down on the verge of the apron. This is kind of now blocking Dowking as they're on the approach. Dowking going to the inside to pass the two drivers, Scott and Scott and M-Power going side by side through turn one. It looks like Scott's got a slightly better measure of M-Power, but M-Power's not giving up. M-Power's got the inside line coming into the international horseshoe of turn three, and Scott is going to concede the position for now. He doesn't really need to fight the position too hard, to be fair, in order to take the win of this race because of the 5-second penalty that M-Power has. So I'm sure Scott will probably be happy to just concede the position and stay close to M-Power. He needs to stay within 4 seconds in order to take the race win. Obviously M-Power needs to get 4 seconds clear of Scott in order to hold on to that lead that he has now taken, so he's got his work cut out for him. And unfortunately Dakuza still a good 27 seconds off, so this time around the strategy hasn't really worked out for him. Hasn't really been able to make it work and get the undercut on the two GT4 competitors of Scott and M-Power. So we're watching once again Dowking and Mr. Van Orman as they are still battling away in the last few minutes of this race, navigating the lap traffic there have pushed them. Dowking's now got the run on Mr. Van Orman as Mr. Van Orman's going defensive, going to the low line down the bottom towards the apron to force Dowking to go up high and around the outside towards turn one, but Dowking is there on the brakes, giving a little bit of a squeeze to Mr. Van Orman. He's going to give him the racing room through turn one though, a little bit of a wiggle as he got onto the throttle, side by side coming through turn two, but it looks like Dowking has just eked ahead of Mr. Van Orman for the moment, and Mr. Van Orman does concede the lead to slot in behind, but goes very wide on the exit there as he catches that exit curb. That could potentially be a slow down penalty for him unless he backs off and tries to clear that one. So the advantage goes to Dowking for the moment, but Dowking does have the bigger penalty if I remember correctly. Yeah, Dowking's got a 4-second penalty, whereas Mr. Van Orman's only got 2 seconds, so providing Mr. Van Orman can stay nice and close to Dowking, he should retain effectively the race lead. So we'll take another quick look at Scott and Dakuza as it's now Jardier trying to navigate these two guys in his LMP3. There you see him. So the guys are pressing on still. Where is Suomi? He has just come out of the bus stop chicane, so he's got a good 11 seconds to Jardier behind him, and he's about 8 to 8.5 seconds off of the leading pair. So it's a pretty good solid performance from Suomi in that black Ligier there that he is running. Scott, as you can see, not really pressuring M-Power too much, too hard. As I was saying, he just needs to stay within 4 seconds of M-Power and he will be fine and end up taking the race win. See Mr. Van Orman and Dowking there, still going at it. So Brake Check and Atlas are still relatively close. Brake Check's just over around about 1.5 seconds off the back of Andrex, and he's got Atlas about, well, same sort of distance, 1.5 seconds behind, just under. Dakuza was also there, just putting a lap on Andrex, as you see. And there's Scott giving a flash of lights to Gav, obviously wanting that Aston Martin driver out of the way so he can continue to pursue and stay close to M-Power in front. And Gav does a very nice job there of letting Scott through without hindering him coming into the Western Horseshoe. 88 in the background of the picture there. working his way through the lap traffic as well. I believe that is Carlito in the Aston Martin. There is ADS. Still in the 140s. Suomi the fastest man on the circuit at the moment as we're into the final 3.5 or so minutes. So 39.8, but previous time round Dowking and Mr. Van Orman there, both with mid to high 39s. As Suomi goes and does a 39.9 on the previous lap around, but yeah, Dowking going a little bit deep there in turn 3. That could allow Mr. Van Orman to gain a car length or so onto the back of his lead. And then at the front of the GT4 field, Scott is still keeping that gap under a second to M-Power. He's taking a good 0.6 out of him on the previous lap round as M-Power goes a little bit deep there coming into the first turn. Good. He managed to get a decent drive off the corner, but he has gone and lost another 0.3 of a second or so as Scott closes up even more in the braking zone coming into turn 3. Very, very close between the two GT4 drivers at the head of the GT4 class field. Scott wanting to have a little bit of a look at M-Power, continue to pile the pressure on and see if he can actually do the pass back on circuit rather than waiting for the penalties to come into effect at the end of the race. As M-Power goes and loses it coming out the exit onto the banking section. Just a little bit too much throttle, has gone and lost the rear of the car. Plenty of room there to avoid making contact with anything, but that has conceded the lead to Scott. He's now a good 2.5 to 3 seconds off behind him. He's got plenty of space to Dakusa in third. So Scott has gone and retaken the lead there. You can see him in the foreground of the shot, just going through the bus stop chicane. You have Gav between him and M-Power. But that has put an end to that GT4 battle between those two drivers. So let's jump back up to the LMP3s as Mr. Van Orman is still very much there fighting with Dowking. Dowking gets very, very sideways coming out the exit of the corner, lighting up those rear tyres. That's really going to hurt the traction on the rear of his Ligier and affect the run coming onto this speedway section here. Mr. Van Orman obviously looking to get that slipstream, get himself into that disturbed air, the path of least resistance to close up onto the back of Dowking in front of him, and he want a good clean run through here. That's a good exit, a much better exit than Dowking's going to get, because Dowking was well off the circuit there. Surely that is going to be a slowdown penalty for him. They do have Colin here in front of them that they will try and navigate. Dowking for the moment continuing to keep his foot in it. They're going to cross the line with probably about 15 seconds remaining in this race, so we're going to have one more lap before the end. Mr. Van Orman closing up in the slipstream isn't going to be close enough to make the move into turn 1 though, but did Dowking get on the brakes early enough to slow it down? Yes, he did. He's actually managed to gain a couple of car lengths over Mr. Van Orman doing that as well. So there is that countdown timer reaching 0. This is going to be our final lap of the final round of our very first season of the Apex Online Racing IMSA Lights Endurance Series. So Mr. Van Orman has Atlas there, I believe it is, for a little bit of company, and navigates around the outside of him coming into the Western Horseshoe. M-Power and Scott have closed up the gaps between each other very, very dramatically. It was 2.5 seconds. It's now back down onto under half a second between these two. So very, very close. They are going to have one more full racing lap as well in order to settle it between them. Mr. Van Orman and Dowking are out onto the pit straight. ADS though is having to make a pit stop in order to get more fuel. He's only got 0.01 of a litre. That's cutting it very, very close there. But Scott has gone and lost the position to M-Power. M-Power's managed to get it into turn 1. Empower's managed to retake that lead. Dowking is coming through the final turn now. He has the gap to Mr. Van Orman, though. So Dowking is going to be coming across the line in first position, but that is going to be very short-lived because of his penalties. So Dowking taking a very momentary win before Mr. Van Orman claims that off him with less time penalty. Fantastic driving between those two. Suomi goes across the line to claim third place in the race. Jardier will be coming across the line next to take fourth, as he is just coming across the start-finish line now as well. There he goes. And then Smolder has managed to get himself ahead of Aid the Ace, with Aid the Ace having to dive to the pit lane to get that little bit of extra fuel just to make it to the end. Just promoted Smolder up into fifth position in this race, as Empower and Scott are still going at it. A little bit of a flash of the lights there to try and clear that Aston Martin as they're coming into the bus stop chicane, but that Aston Martin's not really giving Scott any sort of quarters coming into the bus stop there. That's going to compromise Scott quite heavily, and he's gone and lost contact with the back of Empower, which is very much unfortunate for him. Here we're seeing Smolder coming across the line though, and he will come away with second position in the LMP3 Championship after Bo unfortunately having a screen freeze and retiring from the race. Empower is going to come across the line just in front of Scott, but Scott is going to take the win in the GT4 class. Such is the penalties that Empower have. There's all the drivers parked up doing donuts. Aid the Ace just come across the start-finish line there. Logan has already finished. Aaron has also finished there as well. Minisco has just come across the line as one of the last drivers, and there was one other as well. So here is the final classification then for the LMP3 class, with Mr. Van Orman taking the win with Dowking in second, Suomi third, Jardier fourth, Smolder in fifth position, Aid the Ace coming home in sixth, Logan seventh, Aaron in eighth place. Ninth place goes to Minisco with Bernetto in 10th, J Peaches in 11th, but of course Mr. Van Orman, Suomi and Jardier will not be classified in their positions and will not get the points from that, and instead obviously Dowking will take the win with Smolder second and Aid the Ace third. And then in the GT4 class we have Scott taking the race win after Empower was not able to get the gap that he needed to clear that 5-second penalty. Dakuza in third place pushed him in fourth. Gav in fifth place. Sixth place goes to Carlito. Brake in seventh. Atlas in eighth. Ninth place went to Andrek, so he holds on to that fourth position in the... actually, yes he does. Yes he does. Yes, he does. I don't think he. I don't think Brake. So Brake would have got. Where did he finish? Seventh position. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. So Brake would have got 6 points, which wouldn't be enough to get Andrex for fourth position in the GT4 class. So ninth place does seal that for Andrex. Marauder in 10th. Nyla in 11th position. 12th place goes to Colin, and then TPW will head up the rear of the field, retiring in 13th place. So that is unfortunately the end of the very first season of the Apex Online Racing IMSA Lights Endurance Series. Fantastic racing between all the guys throughout the season. It's provided some fantastic battling, as we have seen on track from start to finish in near enough every single race. Multi-class racing at its finest, with the lap traffic keeping us entertained all the way through the season. So it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much to the drivers for obviously participating in the season, as they are the real stars of the show, and without them we wouldn't be able to provide you guys with the racing coverage. I want to say thank you to King Kodiak as well for joining me the couple of times that he has throughout the season here in the commentary box, giving me someone else to talk to, and on the odd occasion giving my voice a little bit of a rest. And I'd also want to say a big thank you to the league coordinators. Logan, TPW has had a helping hand, and so has Andrex as well, because without you three, this league wouldn't be running in the first place. So a massive thanks to you guys and also all the other coordinators at AOR. I want to say a big thank you to all of you who have tuned in during the streams as well, accompanied us in the live chat. It's fantastic to see the support, see you guys turning up week in, week out, and hopefully you guys enjoy the action. So a big thanks to you guys as well, as obviously we do these live streams for you, so it makes it worthwhile when we see people rocking up and getting interactive with the chat. So thank you very much to that as well. I just want to say one final thing before we sign off fully. Obviously, with the passing of the great Charlie Whiting with F1, very sad and unfortunate news to hear this morning. I basically want to dedicate this race to him, because obviously he does a fantastic job with the safety of all the drivers and putting on a fantastic spectacle in motor racing, and allows drivers to go racing week in and week out. Basically race an awful lot, and he's done a huge, fantastic service. So I just want to dedicate this race to the passing of him. Obviously thoughts with his family as well, and the whole motorsport community, as it's a pretty sad day to hear his passing when waking up this morning. But from all of us here at Apex Online Racing, thank you very much for tuning into the season, guys. Hopefully we shall catch you once again soon. But in the meantime, have fun, stay safe, and take care.